The distant thunder of hooves on hard, packed earth was the only warning Delia Porter had before the sound of men's voices drifted through the cracks of the barn where she huddled, trembling among the hay bales. Her fingers traced the fresh bruises blooming across her cheek, wincing at the tenderness there. 3 days she'd been hiding, 3 days since she'd fled her husband's ranch with nothing but the clothes on her back and the desperate hope of escape. The padlock on the barn door was her only protection, a flimsy barrier between her and the men searching the countryside, men who would drag her back to a life worse than death. The October wind of 1875 whistled through the weathered boards of the abandoned barn on the outskirts of Silverwater Creek, Wyoming territory. Delia pulled the threadbare blanket she'd found tighter around her shoulders, trying to ignore the gnawing hunger in her stomach. At 23, she had already lived a lifetime of suffering, married at 18 to a man who had revealed his true nature only after the vows were spoken. The voices grew closer, and Delia shrank further into the shadows, praying they would pass by. But instead of continuing on, the footsteps approached the barn door. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain they could hear it. "Looks like someone's been using this place," a deep voice said. "Padlock's been tampered with. Probably just some drifter looking for shelter," another replied. "Let's move on. We've got a long ride back to town." "Hold on." The first voice again, authoritative but not unkind. "Someone could be in trouble. That lock wasn't there last week when I rode through." Delia's breath caught in her throat as she heard the sound of metal striking metal. Once, twice, and then the distinctive crack of the lock breaking. Light spilled into the barn as the door swung open, and she pressed herself against the wall, trying to make herself invisible. A tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun stepped inside, removing his hat as his eyes adjusted to the dim interior. "Hello, anyone in here?" Delia remained silent, frozen with fear. The man took another step forward, his spurs jingling softly. "I'm not here to cause trouble. Just checking if anyone needs help." When there was no response, he moved deeper into the barn, scanning the shadows. Delia shifted slightly, and a piece of hay crackled beneath her. The man turned toward the sound. "I know you're there," he said quietly. "I'm not going to hurt you." Slowly, he approached the corner where she hid. As he drew closer, Delia could make out his features, a strong jawline covered with a few days' worth of stubble, piercing blue eyes that widened when they finally found her. "Jesus," he whispered, taking in her bruised face and frightened expression. "What happened to you?" Delia remained silent, eyes wild with fear. "My name is Noah Garrison," he said, crouching down a respectful distance away. "I run the Silver G Ranch about 5 miles east of here. I'm not going to harm you, miss." "Please," Delia finally whispered, her voice cracking from disuse. "Please just leave me alone." Noah's expression softened. "You're hurt, and from the looks of it, you haven't eaten in days." He slowly reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen and a cloth-wrapped package. "Water and some jerky. Take it." He set them on the ground between them and backed away, giving her space. Delia eyed the offering suspiciously but couldn't resist the water. She snatched the canteen and drank deeply, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. "What's your name?" Noah asked gently. She hesitated. "Delia." "Well, Delia, there's a storm coming in tonight. This old barn won't keep you dry or warm. I've got a cabin on my property where you could stay. My housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, would be there. You'd be safe." "No," Delia said sharply. "He'll find me." Noah's eyes narrowed. "Who will find you?" "My husband." The word came out bitter and twisted. Understanding dawned on Noah's face as his eyes traced the bruises. "Did he do that to you?" Delia looked away, which was answer enough. "What's his name?" Noah asked, his voice hardening. "Victor Porter." She watched Noah's reaction carefully. "Of the Rocking P," Noah's jaw tightened. "Porter, I know of him." He was silent for a moment then. "He doesn't have any right to hurt you, no matter what the law says about a man and his wife." "The law doesn't care," Delia said dully. "No one does." "I care," Noah said simply. He stood up slowly. "And I'm not leaving you here." You don't understand, Delia said, panic rising in her voice. He'll kill me if he finds me, and he'll kill anyone helping me too. I'm not afraid of Victor Porter, Noah replied. And I'm not leaving a woman alone in an abandoned barn with a storm coming, he paused. But I won't force you, it's your choice. As if to emphasize his point, thunder rumbled in the distance, closer now. Delia looked at the darkening sky visible through the barn door, then back at Noah's steady gaze. Something in those blue eyes made her want to trust him, despite everything experience had taught her about men. Mrs. Winters is really there? She asked cautiously. Yes. She's been with me since my parents died 5 years ago, mean as a rattlesnake but the best woman I know. A small smile touched his lips. She'll fuss over you something fierce. Delia thought of the coming storm, of another night alone and cold, of the men searching for her. Of Victor's rage when he found her. All right, she finally said, but just for tonight. Noah nodded, not pushing his luck. Can you ride? Yes. Then you can take my horse, I'll walk alongside. Your men, Delia said suddenly, remembering the voices outside. Won't they talk? That was just my foreman, Caleb. He's already gone ahead and he knows when to keep his mouth shut. Noah offered his hand. Come on, we should get moving before that storm hits. Delia hesitated, then reached out and took his hand, allowing him to help her to her feet. She swayed slightly, weak from hunger and exhaustion. Noah steadied her but was careful not to hold on too long. Easy now. When's the last time you ate a proper meal? I don't remember, she admitted. Noah's eyes darkened with concern, but he simply nodded. Well, Mrs. Winters will fix that soon enough. She makes the best stew in the territory. Outside, his horse waited patiently, a beautiful chestnut gelding with a white blaze down its face. Noah helped Delia mount, then gathered the reins and began leading the horse away from the barn, toward the east. As they left, Delia looked back at the place that had been her refuge for 3 desperate days. Then she faced forward, toward whatever fate awaited her at the Silver G Ranch. The first fat raindrops began to fall as they crested the final hill revealing Noah's property. Delia could make out a modest but well-maintained ranch house, a large barn, and several smaller outbuildings. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth within. Almost there, Noah said, picking up the pace as the rain began to fall harder. By the time they reached the front porch, they were both soaked through. The door opened before Noah could knock, revealing a stern-faced older woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. Noah Garrison, what in heaven's name? She stopped mid-sentence when she saw Delia on the horse, her bruised face now visible in the lantern light spilling from the doorway. Mrs. Winters, this is Delia. She needs our help, Noah said simply. The woman's expression softened immediately. Well, don't just stand there in the rain, child. Come inside before you catch your death. Noah helped Delia dismount and led her into the warm house. The scent of stew and fresh bread made her stomach growl audibly. I'll see to the horse, Noah said. Mrs. Winters will take care of you. As he disappeared back into the rain, the older woman gently guided Delia to a chair by the fire. Let's get you out of those wet clothes. I have a nightgown and robe that should fit you well enough. Thank you, Delia whispered, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. Mrs. Winters clucked her tongue as she got a better look at Delia's face. No need for thanks. Just rest now. You're safe here. For the first time in years, Delia dared to believe those words might be true. After a hot bath, clean clothes, and a bowl of stew that tasted like heaven itself, Delia found herself in a small but comfortable bedroom. Mrs. Winters had applied a soothing salve to her bruises and promised that no one would disturb her until morning. Noah wants to speak with you tomorrow, the housekeeper had said, but he says there's no rush. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. Now, lying in a real bed, listening to the rain drumming on the roof, Delia tried to make sense of her situation. She'd run from one man only to put herself at the mercy of another. But something told her Noah Garrison was different from Victor. The way he'd kept his distance, given her choices rather than commands, spoken to her like a person rather than property. These were not things she was accustomed to from men. Still, she couldn't stay. Victor would never stop looking for her. He'd made that clear enough the last time she tried to leave. "You're mine until death," he'd snarled as his fist connected with her ribs. "Try to run again, and I'll make sure it's your death, not mine." Delia touched her side where the bruise from that beating still lingered. No, she couldn't stay. Tomorrow she would thank Noah and Mrs. Winters for their kindness, then continue on her way. Denver, perhaps, or even California. Somewhere Victor would never find her. With that resolution, she finally allowed exhaustion to claim her, falling into the first peaceful sleep she'd had in years. Morning came with golden light streaming through the curtains. Delia woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. The soft bed, the clean sheets, the absence of fear, it all seemed like a dream. A gentle knock at the door brought her fully awake. "Miss Delia," Mrs. Winters called, "there's breakfast when you're ready." "Thank you," Delia replied. "I'll be right there." She found a simple dress laid out for her, obviously one of Mrs. Winters' own, altered hastily to better fit Delia's smaller frame. The gesture brought unexpected tears to her eyes. In the kitchen, she found Mrs. Winters at the stove and Noah at the table, reading a newspaper. He stood when she entered, those blue eyes taking in her appearance with clear relief. "You look better," he said simply. "I feel better," Delia admitted. "Thank you both for your kindness." "Sit and eat," Mrs. Winters instructed, setting a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits before her. "You're still too thin by half." Noah waited until Delia had eaten most of her breakfast before speaking again. "I'd like to talk about what happens next if you're feeling up to it." Delia set down her fork. "I appreciate everything you've done, Mr. Garrison. Noah, please." "Noah," she amended, "but I can't stay here. It's not safe for any of us." "Because of Victor Porter," Noah said, his expression darkening. "Yes." Delia looked down at her plate. "He's a dangerous man. I know, I've had dealings with him before." Noah leaned forward. "But that doesn't mean you should have to run forever." "What choice do I have?" Delia asked bitterly. "The law won't protect me. He's my husband." "The law might not," Noah agreed. "But I will." Delia stared at him in surprise. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Noah replied. "I know you didn't deserve what he did to you. No one does." Mrs. Winters set a cup of coffee in front of Noah with more force than necessary. "Stop dancing around it, Noah. Tell her your idea." Noah shot the housekeeper an exasperated look before turning back to Delia. "I have a proposition. Stay here at least until you're fully recovered. We'll put out word that I've hired a new housekeeper's assistant. Most people know Mrs. Winters has been complaining about needing help." "I have not been complaining," the older woman huffed. "Simply stating facts." Noah ignored her. "The point is, it would give you a reason to be here that wouldn't raise suspicions, and it would give you time to decide what you want to do next." "And when Victor comes looking for me?" Delia asked. "Let him come," Noah said, his voice hardening. "This is my land. He has no authority here." Delia shook her head. "You don't understand. He won't come alone. He has men, loyal men who'll do whatever he asks." "So do I," Noah countered. "And I have friends in town, including Sheriff Taylor. He may not be able to arrest a man for how he treats his wife, but he can arrest him for trespassing or making threats." "It's too dangerous," Delia insisted. "More dangerous than you heading out alone with winter coming," Mrs. Winters interjected. "Where would you go, child? How would you live?" Delia had no answer for that. Her hasty escape had involved no planning beyond getting away from Victor's fists. "Stay," Noah said quietly. "At least for a while. If you still want to leave after you're stronger, I won't stop you. I'll even help you get wherever you want to go." Delia looked between Noah and Mrs. Winters, these strangers who were offering her more kindness than she'd known in years. The smart thing would be to leave immediately, and yet, "All right," she finally said, "but only until I'm recovered, then I'll move on." Noah nodded, though something in his eyes suggested he hoped she might change her mind. "Then it's settled." "Welcome to the Silver G, Miss Porter." "Delia," she corrected. "Just Delia, please. Delia," he repeated, and somehow the way he said her name made it sound like something precious. The days that followed established a new rhythm in Delia's life. True to their word, Noah and Mrs. Winters introduced her as the new housekeeper's assistant to the handful of ranch hands who worked the property. The men tipped their hats respectfully and asked no questions about her bruised face, which was gradually beginning to heal. Delia threw herself into work, grateful for the distraction. She helped Mrs. Winters with cooking and cleaning, learned to make soap and candles, and even began tending a small kitchen garden the older woman had started. Noah kept a respectful distance, but Delia often caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. He was unfailingly kind, asking after her comfort without being intrusive, ensuring she had everything she needed without making her feel indebted. 2 weeks after her arrival, Delia was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Fear spiked through her and she ducked behind the sheets, peering anxiously at the approaching rider. It wasn't Victor, but a young man she recognized as one of Noah's hands. He was riding hard, his expression urgent. "Miss Delia," he called as he spotted her. "Is the boss around?" "In the barn, I think," she replied, her heart still racing. "Is something wrong, Sam?" The young cowboy hesitated. "Might be. Best let the boss tell you." He dismounted and hurried toward the barn, leaving Delia standing anxiously among the billowing sheets. A few minutes later, Noah emerged, his expression grim. He spotted her and approached, clearly debating what to say. "Victor's been asking questions in town," he finally said. "Sam overheard him at the saloon last night. He's offering a reward for information about your whereabouts." Delia felt the blood drain from her face. "I should leave. Now," Noah shook his head. "That's exactly what he wants, to flush you out, get you on the open road where you're vulnerable. But he'll come here eventually," Delia protested. "Someone will talk, money loosens tongues." "Let him come," Noah said, a dangerous edge to his voice. "I meant what I said before. You're under my protection now." "I won't have you risking your life for me," Delia insisted. Noah stepped closer, his eyes intense. "That's not your decision to make. I choose to help you, Delia. Let me." Something in his gaze made her breath catch. No man had ever looked at her that way before, like she was worth fighting for, worth protecting. "Why?" she whispered. "Why risk everything for someone you barely know?" Noah was quiet for a long moment. "Because it's the right thing to do," he finally said. "And because in these past 2 weeks I've come to care about what happens to you." The simple honesty of his words struck Delia speechless. "We should be more careful for a while," Noah continued. "No trips to town for you. Stay close to the house." He hesitated. "I've asked a couple of the men to take turns keeping watch, just in case." Delia nodded, unable to argue further. The reality of her situation was closing in again, the brief peace she'd found at the Silver G threatened by Victor's relentless pursuit. "Thank you," she managed to say. Noah's expression softened. "You don't need to thank me, Delia. Just promise you won't run off without telling me. I can't protect you if I don't know where you are." "I promise," she said, the words feeling strangely like a deeper commitment than she'd intended. Noah nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. Now finish your laundry before Mrs. Winters has both our hides." He offered a small smile before turning back toward the barn. Delia watched him go, a confusing mix of emotions churning within her. Fear of Victor's inevitable arrival, gratitude for Noah's protection, and something else, something warm and unfamiliar that stirred whenever Noah was near. That evening, as Delia helped Mrs. Winters prepare dinner, the older woman studied her thoughtfully. "You're good for him, you know," she said abruptly. Delia looked up in surprise. "I beg your pardon." "Noah," Mrs. Winters clarified, continuing to knead dough with strong, weathered hands. "He's been alone too long. Buried himself in this ranch after his parents died, hardly goes to town except for supplies. But since you came, there's a light in his eyes again." "Mrs. Winters," Delia protested, feeling her cheeks warm. "It's not like that, he's just being kind." The older woman snorted. Child, I've known that boy since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. I know the difference between kindness and something more. Even if that were true, Delia said carefully, I'm still a married woman. To a monster, Mrs. Winters said bluntly. There are ways out of such marriages. Divorce is nearly impossible, especially for a woman, Delia pointed out. And even if I could obtain one, Victor would never agree to it. Mrs. Winters was quiet for a moment, her hands working the dough with practiced motions. There are other ways for marriages to end, she finally said, her voice low. Delia stared at her, understanding the implication. I won't wish death on anyone, not even him. No, Mrs. Winters sighed. I suppose that's why you're the good person you are, but mark my words, Delia Porter. One way or another, you deserve a chance at happiness, and so does Noah. Before Delia could respond, they heard the front door open and Noah's boots in the hallway. The conversation was over, but Mrs. Winters' words lingered in Delia's mind long into the night. 3 days later, the confrontation they'd all been dreading finally came. Delia was in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Winters preserve the last of the fall apples, when they heard the thunder of multiple horses approaching. Mrs. Winters moved to the window, peering out cautiously. 5 riders, she reported, her voice tense. And that'll be Victor Porter in the lead unless I miss my guess. Delia felt her legs go weak. I should hide. No, Mrs. Winters said firmly. You stand your ground. Noah and the boys are already out there. Indeed, through the window, Delia could see Noah and 3 of his ranch hands forming a line in front of the house, facing the approaching riders. I can't let them fight my battle, Delia protested. Mrs. Winters fixed her with a stern look. This stopped being just your battle the moment Noah brought you here. Now we stand together. With trembling hands, Delia wiped apple juice from her fingers and followed Mrs. Winters onto the front porch. They remained behind Noah and his men, but clearly visible. Victor Porter reined his horse to a stop about 20 feet away, his cold eyes immediately finding Delia. He was a handsome man in a harsh way, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a carefully trimmed mustache. But his good looks had long ago ceased to hide the ugliness within. There you are, wife, he called, his voice carrying the false charm Delia knew so well. You've led me on quite a chase. She's not going anywhere with you, Porter, Noah said, his voice steady but dangerous. Victor's eyes shifted to Noah, narrowing slightly. This is between a man and his wife, Garrison. I suggest you stay out of it. Not when the man in question uses his fists on a woman half his size, Noah replied. Victor's false smile tightened. What happens in my home is my business. The law recognizes a husband's right to discipline his wife. The law may, Noah agreed, but I don't. Delia stays here under my protection. Victor laughed, though there was no humor in it. Your protection, you're outnumbered, Garrison, am I? Noah gestured slightly, and Delia noticed for the first time that 2 more of Noah's men had positioned themselves at the corners of the house, rifles ready. Seems even to me. The men with Victor shifted uneasily, but Victor himself remained calm. I could bring the sheriff out here. Do it, Noah challenged. Sheriff Taylor's a friend of mine. I'd be happy to tell him how I found Delia locked in an abandoned barn, half-starved and beaten black and blue. A muscle twitched in Victor's jaw, the first sign of the rage Delia knew was building. Delia, he called, looking past Noah. Come here now. I'm willing to forgive your foolishness if you come home where you belong. Delia felt Mrs. Winters' hand on her arm, steadying her. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, though she remained on the porch. No, Victor, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I'm never coming back to you. Victor's face darkened. You made vows, Delia, till death do us part. Vows you broke the first time you raised your hand to me, Delia replied. You're my wife, Victor snarled, his mask of civility slipping. My property. She's a person, Noah cut in, his voice hard. Not property, and she's made her choice. Victor stared at them both, rage contorting his features. Then suddenly he smiled, a cold, calculating expression that sent chills down Delia's spine. Fine, he said quietly. Have it your way for now. He turned his attention back to Delia. But remember this, wife, you're mine until death. If I can't have you, no one will." With that, he wheeled his horse around. "Let's go, boys," he ordered his men, and they rode away in a cloud of dust. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Noah turned to his men. "Double the watch tonight, I don't trust him." As the ranch hands dispersed to their posts, Noah climbed the steps to the porch where Delia stood trembling. "You did well," he said softly. "He'll be back," Delia whispered. "He meant what he said." Noah nodded grimly. "I know, but we'll be ready." He hesitated, then added, "I'm proud of you, Delia. Standing up to him like that took courage." "It wasn't courage," she admitted. "I was terrified. I still am." "That's what makes it courage," Noah said, "doing what's right despite the fear." Mrs. Winters cleared her throat. "Well, those apples won't preserve themselves. Come inside, both of you. No sense standing out here inviting trouble." As they followed her inside, Noah's hand brushed against Delia's, a brief touch that nonetheless sent warmth spreading through her. She looked up at him, meeting his steady gaze, and for a moment, the fear receded, replaced by something that felt dangerously like hope. That night, Delia couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every whistle of wind through the eaves had her sitting up in bed, certain Victor had returned. Finally, she gave up and wrapped herself in a shawl, padding quietly downstairs for a cup of tea. She was surprised to find Noah at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of him, his gun beside it. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, looking up as she entered. Delia shook her head. "Every noise." "I know." Noah stood and moved to the stove. "Tea, please." As he prepared it for her, Delia studied him in the soft lamplight. The strong line of his jaw, the way his dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the capable hands that moved with surprising gentleness. "You should try to rest," he said, setting the tea before her. "I've got men watching the property. Nothing will happen tonight." "How can you be sure?" "Because Victor Porter is many things, but stupid isn't one of them. He knows we're on alert right now." Noah sat back down across from her. "He'll wait, try to lull us into a false sense of security. And then," Noah met her eyes, "and then we'll still be ready." Delia wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "I can't live like this forever, Noah, looking over my shoulder, putting you and everyone here at risk." "What's the alternative? Running? Hiding?" Noah shook his head. "That's no life either." "There must be something," Delia insisted, "some way to end this." Noah was quiet for a moment, considering. "There might be. I've been thinking about it since Porter showed up today." "What is it?" "Divorce is difficult, as you said, but not impossible." Noah leaned forward. "I have a friend in Cheyenne, a lawyer named James Montgomery. He's helped women in situations like yours before." Delia's heart quickened with a dangerous hope. "Even against men like Victor." "Especially against men like Victor. James has made it something of a personal mission." Noah hesitated. "It wouldn't be easy. You'd have to go to Cheyenne, testify about the abuse. It could get ugly." "Uglier than this." Delia gestured to her face, where the bruises were now fading to yellow. Noah's expression softened. "No, I suppose not." "Would your friend really help me?" "I'm certain of it. I can write to him tomorrow, explain the situation." Delia took a sip of her tea, considering. "Even if he agreed, how would I get to Cheyenne? Victor would be watching for me on the roads." "I'd take you," Noah said simply. "You can't leave the ranch. I can for this," he interrupted. "Caleb can manage things here for a few weeks." Delia stared at him, overwhelmed by his willingness to help her. "Why are you doing all this?" "The truth, Noah." Noah held her gaze, something shifting in his blue eyes. "Because I've never met anyone as brave as you, Delia Porter. Because in the few weeks you've been here, you've brought light back to this place." "Because," he paused, seeming to struggle with himself, "because I think I'm falling in love with you." The confession hung in the air between them, as fragile and precious as spun glass. "You can't," Delia whispered, even as her heart leapt at his words. "I know I shouldn't," Noah admitted. "You're married, you're vulnerable, and the timing couldn't be worse, but it's the truth all the same." Delia felt tears welling in her eyes. "I can't offer you anything, Noah, not while I'm tied to him." "I'm not asking for anything," Noah said gently. I just wanted you to know why I'm helping you. It's not out of pity or obligation. It's because I care about you deeply." A tear slipped down Delia's cheek. "I care about you too," she confessed. "More than I should, more than is safe for either of us." Noah reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. "Then let me help you get free, not for any promise or expectation, but so you can have a choice about your own life." Delia looked at his outstretched hand, then slowly placed her own in it. His fingers were warm and calloused from hard work, yet they held hers with exquisite gentleness. "All right," she said softly. "Write to your friend." Noah squeezed her hand, his eyes shining with a mix of tenderness and determination. "First thing tomorrow." For the first time since she'd fled Victor's ranch, Delia allowed herself to believe that freedom might truly be possible. Noah's letter went out the next day with a ranch hand headed to town. For the next week, life at the Silver G continued with an uneasy vigilance. There was no sign of Victor or his men, which only made Delia more anxious. She knew her husband well enough to understand that his silence didn't mean he'd given up. 9 days after Noah sent his letter, a response arrived from James Montgomery. Noah read it aloud to Delia in the privacy of his study. "Dear Noah," he began, "your letter troubled me greatly, though I cannot say I'm surprised by Porter's behavior. I've heard rumors about him for years, but without a willing witness, there was nothing to be done. I would be honored to help Mrs. Porter seek a divorce on grounds of extreme cruelty. Wyoming Territory's laws are more progressive than most regarding women's rights, and with physical evidence and testimony, we have a fighting chance. However, I must caution you both, this will not be easy. Porter is a powerful man with connections. He will fight this with everything he has. If Mrs. Porter is still willing, bring her to Cheyenne as soon as possible. I've enclosed some documents for her to sign before you depart. Your friend, James Montgomery." Noah set the letter down and looked at Delia. "Well, what do you think?" Delia took a deep breath. "I think it's time I stopped being afraid and started fighting back." Noah's face broke into a smile that transformed his features. "That's the spirit. We can leave in 2 days if that suits you." "I need some time to make arrangements here." "What if Victor's watching the roads?" Delia asked. "We won't take the main road," Noah replied. "There's an old trail through the foothills that adds a day to the journey but avoids the usual routes. Few people know about it." Delia nodded, trying to quell the anxiety rising within her. 2 days, then." 2 days, Noah confirmed. He hesitated, then added, "You know this isn't the end, right? Even if we get to Cheyenne, even if James helps you file for divorce, Victor will still come after you." "I know," Delia said quietly, "but at least I'll be fighting for my freedom instead of just running from him." Noah studied her for a moment, a mix of admiration and concern in his eyes. "You're a remarkable woman, Delia Porter." The compliment warmed her but also reminded her of the reality they faced. "I'm still his wife," she said softly. "We can't forget that." "I haven't forgotten," Noah assured her, "but I haven't changed my mind either about any of it." The intensity of his gaze left no doubt about what he meant. Despite everything, despite the danger and uncertainty, his feelings for her remained steadfast. And God help her, so did hers for him. The day of their departure dawned crisp and clear, with a hint of winter in the air. Noah had made all the arrangements. Caleb would oversee the ranch in his absence. 2 of the most trusted hands would accompany them to Cheyenne. Mrs. Winters had packed enough provisions for a week's journey. As Delia prepared to leave, the older woman pressed a small bundle into her hands. "A few of my own things," she explained gruffly. "Clothing more suitable for travel than what you have. And this," she held out a small Derringer pistol. "It was my late husband's, small enough to hide in a pocket or sleeve. Every woman should have one, especially in your situation." Delia accepted it hesitantly. "I've never fired a gun." "Noah can teach you on the trail," Mrs. Winters said, "just in case." The housekeeper pulled Delia into a tight embrace. "Be careful, child, and come back to us when it's safe." "I will," Delia promised, surprised by how much she meant it. In a few short weeks, The Silver G had become more of a home than Victor's grand ranch had ever been. Outside, Noah was checking the saddles one last time. He'd provided Delia with a gentle mare named Daisy, patient enough for an inexperienced rider but swift when needed. "Ready?" he asked as she approached. Delia nodded, trying to project more confidence than she felt. "As I'll ever be." Noah helped her mount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. Then he swung up onto his own horse, a powerful black stallion named Thunder. "Stay close," he instructed as they set out, the two ranch hands Ben and Frank riding ahead and behind. "The trail gets rough in places." They rode east at first, as if heading toward town, then veered north after a few miles, entering a dense patch of forest that concealed their change in direction. By midday, they had reached the foothills Noah had mentioned, following a barely visible path that wound upward through increasingly rugged terrain. "Not many know about this trail," Noah explained as they rode. "It was used by trappers years ago before the territory was settled. My father showed it to me when I was a boy." They made good time that first day, stopping to make camp in a sheltered valley as the sun began to set. While Ben and Frank saw to the horses, Noah built a small fire and prepared a simple meal from their provisions. As they ate, Delia found herself studying the landscape around them, the towering pines, the distant peaks tinged pink by the setting sun, the vastness of the sky above. It struck her that this was the first time in her adult life she'd traveled anywhere without Victor's permission or presence. "What are you thinking?" Noah asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "That I've never seen the world like this before," Delia admitted. "Victor never let me travel, said a woman's place was at home." Noah's jaw tightened slightly at the mention of Victor, but his voice remained gentle. "There's a lot of beauty in this territory. Maybe someday you'll get to see more of it." "Maybe," Delia agreed, allowing herself to imagine such a future one where she was free to come and go as she pleased, to make her own choices. One where, perhaps, Noah might be by her side. After dinner, while Ben and Frank took the first watch, Noah brought out Mrs. Winter's Derringer. "She told me she gave this to you," he said. "Have you ever fired a gun before?" Delia shook her head. "Victor didn't approve of women handling firearms." "Of course he didn't," Noah muttered. "Well, it's simple enough. This model only has 2 shots, so you have to make them count." He showed her how to load it, how to hold it, how to aim. "Tomorrow, when we stop for lunch, we'll practice with some actual shooting, but the principle is straightforward: point and squeeze, don't pull." Delia nodded, trying to commit his instructions to memory. The small gun felt heavy in her hand, a deadly weight that represented both danger and protection. "I hope you never have to use it," Noah said quietly. "But if you do, don't hesitate, especially if it's Victor." Delia looked up sharply at that, meeting Noah's steady gaze. "I mean it, Delia," he said. "If it comes down to him or you, choose yourself. The world would be a better place without men like Victor Porter." The fierceness of his tone startled her, but there was no denying the truth in his words. Victor had threatened to kill her if she tried to leave him. If it came to a confrontation, he wouldn't show mercy. "I understand," she said softly, tucking the Derringer into the pocket of her skirt. They fell silent then, watching the flames dance in the small fire. The night was growing cold, and Delia pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "You should get some rest," Noah said eventually. "We have another long day tomorrow." Delia nodded and retreated to the small tent the men had set up for her. Inside, wrapped in blankets against the mountain chill, she listened to the night sounds, the soft murmur of the men's voices, the occasional whinny of a horse, the wind in the pines. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly hope that freedom might be within her grasp. If they reached Cheyenne, if James Montgomery was as good as Noah claimed, if the courts ruled in her favor, so many ifs. But each one a step closer to a life she'd barely dared to imagine. A life where, perhaps, she might even find love again, real love, built on respect and kindness rather than possession and fear. With that thought warming her more than the blankets, Delia drifted into sleep. The next 2 days passed without incident as they wound their way through the mountains. True to his word, Noah taught Delia to shoot during their midday rest on the second day. She was a quick study, hitting a makeshift target on her third attempt. "Good," Noah had said, approval evident in his voice. "Just remember, if you ever need to use it for real, aim for the center," Delia finished for him. "And don't hesitate." By the evening of the third day, they had descended from the foothills and were approaching more populated areas. They made camp earlier than usual, wanting to rest well before the final push to Cheyenne the next day. "Once we reach the outskirts, we'll head straight for James's office," Noah explained as they sat around the fire. "He lives above it, so even if we arrive after hours, he'll be there." Delia nodded, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Tomorrow she would take the first official step towards severing her ties to Victor. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. "What's he like?" she asked. "Your friend James?" Noah smiled. "Intense. Brilliant. Stubborn as a mule when he believes in something. He was a few years ahead of me in school, but we became friends when I helped him fight off some bullies." His expression grew more serious. "His sister was in a situation similar to yours. Her husband beat her for years before she finally ran away. She died of her injuries before she could get help." "Oh," Delia said softly, "I'm so sorry." "That's why he became a lawyer," Noah continued, "and why he particularly likes to help women escape abusive marriages. It's personal for him." "Then I'm even more grateful for his help," Delia said. They fell into companionable silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the soft conversation of Ben and Frank as they tended the horses. Suddenly, one of the horses Noah's thunder whinnied sharply and stamped the ground. Noah was on his feet instantly, hand going to his gun. Something spooked him. Ben moved silently to the edge of the camp, peering into the darkness. "I don't see anything, boss," but the crack of a rifle shot split the night. Ben crumpled to the ground with a cry of pain. "Get down." Noah shouted, diving toward Delia and pulling her behind the cover of a large boulder as more shots rang out. Frank had taken cover behind a tree and was returning fire, though it was nearly impossible to see their attackers in the darkness. "How many?" Noah called to him. "Can't tell," Frank replied tensely. "At least 3, maybe more." Noah's face was grim in the firelight. "Victor," he said to Delia. "Has to be." Fear clutched at Delia's heart. "How did he find us?" "Must have had someone watching the ranch," Noah said, checking his revolver. "Saw us leave, followed at a distance." Another volley of shots peppered their camp. One struck uncomfortably close to their position, sending stone chips flying. "We're pinned down," Noah muttered. He glanced at Ben, who was clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. "And Ben's hit." "What do we do?" Delia asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Noah thought for a moment, his expression resolute. "They want you, not us. If I can create a distraction, you could make a run for it on Daisy. Head straight for Cheyenne. It's only about 15 miles east of here." "I'm not leaving you," Delia protested. "You have to," Noah insisted. "Get to James, he can help you, protect you legally if nothing else." "And what about you?" Noah's smile was grim. "I'll be right behind you." "But someone needs to hold them off while you get away." Before Delia could argue further, a voice called out from the darkness. "Delia, I know you're there, wife," Victor's voice cold and controlled. "Come out now and maybe I'll let Garrison and his men live." Noah's grip on his gun tightened. "Don't listen to him, he's lying." "You know I'm not, Delia," Victor called again. "You know what I'm capable of. Come back to me now and this all ends peacefully." Delia closed her eyes, memories of Victor's peace flashing through her mind. Bruises, broken bones, endless nights of terror. "No," she whispered, then louder. "No, Victor, I'm never coming back to you." Victor's laugh drifted through the darkness. "Then I'm afraid Mr. Garrison here is going to die for his gallantry, and you'll come back to me anyway." Another shot rang out, this one striking the boulder inches from Noah's head. "Delia, listen to me," Noah said urgently. "When I start firing, run for Daisy. She's tethered just behind us. Don't wait, don't look back, just ride east until you reach Cheyenne." Noah, please, he cut her off, his blue eyes intense in the dim light. I can't protect you if I'm worrying about you being shot. Frank and I will hold them off, then follow as soon as we can. Delia wanted to refuse to stay and fight alongside him, but she knew he was right. Her presence was putting him in danger. The best thing she could do was reach Cheyenne and get the legal protection James Montgomery might provide. All right, she finally agreed, but promise me you'll be careful. Noah's expression softened momentarily. I promise. He hesitated, then quickly pressed his lips to hers, a brief, fierce kiss that conveyed everything they hadn't had time to say. Now get ready to run. Delia's heart raced, her lips still tingling from his kiss. She nodded, shifting into a crouch. Noah exchanged a signal with Frank, who nodded in understanding. Then, with a deep breath, Noah rose slightly and fired 3 rapid shots in the direction of Victor's voice. Now, he shouted to Delia. She bolted from behind the boulder, running low toward where Daisy was tethered. Behind her, Noah and Frank laid down covering fire, the night erupting with noise and flashes of gunpowder. A bullet whizzed past her ear as she reached Daisy, who was stamping nervously. With shaking hands, Delia untied the reins and pulled herself into the saddle. Go. Noah's voice called over the gunfire. Delia dug her heels into Daisy's sides and the mare took off, racing away from the camp. She bent low over the horse's neck, making herself as small a target as possible. More shots sounded behind her, but she followed Noah's instructions and didn't look back. Tears streamed down her face as she rode, partly from the wind, partly from fear not for herself, but for the man she was leaving behind. Please be safe, she whispered as Daisy carried her into the darkness, toward Cheyenne and whatever uncertain future awaited her there. The night seemed endless as Delia rode, guided only by the stars and her general knowledge of which direction Cheyenne lay. Daisy was a steady mount, seeming to sense her rider's urgency, maintaining a pace that ate up the miles without exhausting herself. As the eastern sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn, Delia caught sight of smoke on the horizon chimneys from Cheyenne's buildings. Relief washed over her, though it was quickly tempered by worry for Noah, Ben, and Frank. Had they escaped? Was Noah even now riding after her as he'd promised? Or had Victor? She couldn't complete the thought. Instead, she urged Daisy on toward the town that was now clearly visible in the growing light. Cheyenne was already stirring as Delia rode in, early risers opening shops and setting up market stalls. She drew curious glances, a woman alone, disheveled from a night's hard riding, but no one stopped her as she made her way through the streets, searching for any sign that might indicate a lawyer's office. Finally, she spotted it. A modest building with a shingle reading James Montgomery, attorney at law. Below that, in smaller letters, specializing in family law and women's legal rights. Delia dismounted stiffly, her legs aching from the long ride. She tied Daisy to a hitching post and approached the door, only to find it locked. Of course, it was barely sunrise. The office wouldn't open for hours yet. Noah had said James lived above his office. Gathering her courage, Delia moved to the side of the building where she found a separate entrance with a staircase leading to the second floor. She climbed the stairs and knocked firmly on the door. For a long moment, there was no response. Then she heard movement inside, and the door opened to reveal a man in his early 40s, hastily dressed in trousers and a partially buttoned shirt, his dark hair mussed from sleep. "Yes," he asked, squinting at her in confusion. "Can I help you, Mr. Montgomery?" Delia asked. "James Montgomery, that's me," he confirmed, now looking more alert. "And you are, Delia Porter, Noah Garrison's friend," she swallowed hard. "He said you could help me." James's eyes widened in recognition. "Mrs. Porter, yes, Noah wrote about you." He glanced past her, his brow furrowing. "Where is Noah? I expected you both." Delia felt tears threatening again. "There was trouble. Victor, my husband, he found us. There was a fight. Noah stayed behind to hold them off while I escaped." James's expression grew grim. "Come inside, Mrs. Porter, quickly." He ushered her into a modest but comfortable apartment, gesturing for her to sit at a small dining table while he finished buttoning his shirt. "Tell me everything," he said. "Don't leave anything out." Delia recounted the events of the past weeks, her escape from Victor, finding refuge at the Silver G, the confrontation when Victor came looking for her, and finally the ambush the night before. "And you haven't seen or heard from Noah since?" James asked when she'd finished. Delia shook her head, fighting back tears. He promised he'd follow, but James's expression was grave but determined. "Noah Garrison is one of the most capable men I know. If anyone could survive such an encounter, it's him." He stood up decisively. "First things first. You need legal protection, and quickly. I'll prepare the divorce petition this morning and file it immediately." "Will that stop Victor from taking me back?" Delia asked. "Not by itself, no," James admitted, "but I'll also request a restraining order citing the danger to your life. Judge Wilson is sympathetic to cases like yours. With the visible evidence of abuse," he gestured to her face, where the bruises were still faintly visible, "and your testimony, I believe he'll grant it. And if Noah—" Delia couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. James's expression softened. "Let's not borrow trouble, Mrs. Porter. For now, you'll stay here where I can protect you. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, will arrive shortly. She can show you to the guest room where you can rest and freshen up." "My horse, I'll see to it," James assured her. "Now, try to get some rest. We have a busy day ahead." True to his word, James filed the divorce petition and request for a restraining order that very morning. By afternoon, Judge Wilson had reviewed the case and granted the temporary order, forbidding Victor from approaching within 100 yards of Delia. "It's only temporary," James explained as he showed her the document. "But it gives us legal grounds to have him arrested if he violates it." "The divorce itself will take longer." Delia nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and apprehension. The legal protection was a step toward freedom, but it was just paper. If Victor was determined enough, and she knew he was, a court order wouldn't stop him. And then there was Noah. As the day wore on with no word from him, Delia's worry deepened into a gnawing fear. "Shouldn't we send someone to look for them?" she asked James as evening approached. The lawyer sighed. "I've already sent a telegram to the sheriff in the nearest town to the location you described. But it's remote country. It could be days before anyone reaches the site." Delia wrapped her arms around herself, trying to ward off the chill of dread. "I should never have left him." "You did exactly what Noah wanted you to do," James said firmly. "He knew the risks." "We both did when I agreed to help you." Delia looked up at him sharply. "What do you mean?" James's expression was somber. "Victor Porter isn't just some rancher with a temper, Mrs. Porter. He has connections, political, financial. Men like him aren't accustomed to losing what they consider theirs. You knew how dangerous he was when you agreed to help me." "I knew," James confirmed. "So did Noah. We discussed it in our correspondence." Delia felt a surge of anger. "And neither of you thought to tell me." "Would it have changed your mind about seeking divorce?" "No," Delia admitted after a moment. "But I might have been more careful. I might not have let Noah risk his life for me." James's expression softened. "Noah made his own choices, Mrs. Porter. And from what I can see, he considered you worth the risk." Those words stayed with Delia as she retired to the guest room that night, too anxious to eat much of the dinner Mrs. Chen had prepared. She sat by the window, watching the street below, hoping against hope to see a familiar figure approaching, but the hours passed, and Noah did not appear. 3 days later, there was still no word from Noah, and Delia was nearly sick with worry. She had given her formal testimony to Judge Wilson, who had extended the restraining order and set a date for the divorce hearing 6 weeks hence. "It's the soonest we can manage," James had explained apologetically. "Divorce proceedings take time, even in clear cases of cruelty." Delia had nodded numbly, too preoccupied with thoughts of Noah to care much about legal timelines. On the morning of the 4th day, she was helping Mrs. Chen prepare breakfast when they heard an urgent knocking at the door downstairs. James, who had been reviewing some documents at the dining table, rose quickly. "Stay here," he instructed, grabbing his revolver from a drawer before heading downstairs. Delia and Mrs. Chen exchanged worried glances, listening intently. They heard the door open, followed by muffled voices, James's and another man's. Then, to Delia's surprise, James called up, "Delia, come down, quickly." Heart racing, Delia hurried down the stairs to the office. James was standing in the doorway, speaking to a man on horseback, a man wearing a sheriff's badge. "Mrs. Porter?" the sheriff asked as she appeared. "Yes," Delia said anxiously. "What is it?" "Have you found—" "Not exactly, madam," the sheriff interrupted, "but a rider just arrived in town. Said he has an urgent message for you, wouldn't give it to anyone else." "A rider?" Delia's heart leapt. "Who?" "Didn't give his name," the sheriff replied. "Big fellow, looks like he's been through hell. He's at the doctor's office now, getting patched up." James grabbed his coat. "We'll go immediately." "Thank you, Sheriff." As they hurried through the streets toward the doctor's office, Delia's mind raced with possibilities. Could it be Noah, or one of his men, or was it a trap set by Victor? The doctor's small waiting room was empty when they arrived. James spoke briefly to the receptionist, who nodded and disappeared through a door to the examination rooms. A moment later, the door opened again, and Frank stepped out, his arm in a sling, his face bruised but very much alive. "Frank," Delia cried, rushing forward. "Thank God you're all right." "Where's Noah and Ben?" Frank's expression was grim. "Ben didn't make it, Miss Delia. Took another bullet trying to help the boss." Delia felt her blood run cold. "And Noah, they took him," Frank said, his voice rough with emotion. "Porter and his men. The boss held them off long enough for me to slip away, told me to find you, warn you." "Warn me about what?" Delia asked, though she already feared the answer. "Porter's coming for you, Miss Delia. Said if you don't come back to him willingly, he'll kill Garrison." Frank looked at her miserably. "The boss said not to tell you that part, said you should just stay hidden, but I thought you had a right to know." Delia felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. Victor had Noah, because of her, and now he was using Noah's life as leverage to force her return. "Where are they?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil within. "Porter's ranch, I reckon," Frank replied. "That's where they were headed when I lost their trail." James put a hand on Delia's shoulder. "Delia, listen to me. We can go to the territorial authorities with this. Kidnapping is a serious crime, even for someone with Porter's connections." "And how long would that take?" Delia demanded. "Days, weeks, while Noah—" She couldn't finish the thought. "You can't seriously be considering going back to Porter," James said, his voice rising in alarm. "I won't let Noah die for me," Delia said firmly. "That's exactly what he was trying to prevent by sending you here," James argued. "If you go back to Porter now, everything Noah risked his life for will be for nothing." Delia knew he was right, but the thought of Noah in Victor's hands, suffering because of her, was unbearable. "There has to be another way," she said desperately. James was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Perhaps there is," he finally said, "but it would be extremely dangerous." "I don't care," Delia said immediately. "Tell me." James looked from Delia to Frank, his expression resolute. "We need a plan, and we need help." By the time they returned to James's office, the outlines of a plan were taking shape. James sent telegrams to several contacts, a U.S. Marshal he knew, a judge in Cheyenne with the authority to issue warrants, and somewhat surprisingly, a woman named Alina Bright. "Who is she?" Delia asked as James handed the telegram to a messenger. "A journalist," James replied. "One of the best in the territory. If something happens to us, she'll make sure the story gets told, and she has connections of her own that might prove useful." Frank, despite his injuries, insisted on being part of the rescue attempt. "The boss would do the same for any of us," he said simply. As they waited for replies to the telegrams, Delia paced the apartment, unable to sit still. Her mind kept returning to Noah, his kindness, his strength, the brief kiss they'd shared before everything went wrong. The thought that she might never see him again, or worse, that he might die because of her, was unbearable. "You love him, don't you?" James asked quietly, watching her. Delia stopped pacing, surprised by the direct question. Yes, she admitted, I do. James nodded, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. Then we'll get him back, and we'll end this once and for all. By evening, responses had arrived to all of James's telegrams. Marshal Collins would meet them outside Victor's ranch in 2 days' time, with a warrant for Victor's arrest on charges of kidnapping and attempted murder. Eleanor Bright was already on her way to Cheyenne. And Judge Wilson had expanded the restraining order to prohibit Victor from approaching not only Delia, but also Noah and any associates of James Montgomery. It's a legal fiction, of course, James explained. The real protection will come from the marshal and his deputies. But it gives us additional legal ground to stand on. That night, as Delia tried to sleep, she found herself praying for the first time in years. Not to the stern, judgmental God of her childhood church, but to whatever force might be listening, whatever power might keep Noah alive until they could reach him. Hold on, she whispered into the darkness. Please, Noah, hold on. The journey to Victor's ranch took a day and a half of hard riding. Delia insisted on coming despite James's objections. I'm done running, she told him, and I'm done letting others fight my battles for me. They met Marshal Collins and his 3 deputies at the agreed location, a ridge overlooking the sprawling Rocking P Ranch. From their vantage point, they could see the main house, the bunkhouse, the barns, and the corrals. Place is well staffed, the marshal observed, lowering his spyglass. I count at least a dozen men moving about. Most of them are just ranch hands, Delia said. They won't fight for Victor, but he has 4 or 5 men who are more enforcers than cowboys. They're the ones to watch for, the marshal nodded. Any idea where they might be keeping Garrison? Delia considered. The old storage cellar, probably. It's under the main house, accessible through a trapdoor in the pantry. Victor used to. She swallowed hard. He used to lock me down there when he was particularly angry. James's expression darkened at this revelation, but he kept his focus on the practical matter at hand. How do we get to it? The kitchen entrance is at the back of the house, Delia explained. Usually unguarded since it's just for servants. Marshal Collins studied the layout. All right. Here's how we'll do this. We'll wait until nightfall. 2 of my men will create a distraction at the front of the property. Meanwhile, Mrs. Porter will guide me, Mr. Montgomery, and Deputy Hayes to the kitchen entrance. We'll secure Garrison, then place Porter under arrest. And if he resists? James asked. The marshal's expression was grim. Then he'll face the consequences of that decision. As they waited for darkness to fall, Eleanor Bright arrived, having ridden hard from Cheyenne. She was a striking woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. James, she greeted the lawyer with a quick embrace, you certainly know how to stir up trouble. Eleanor, thank you for coming. James introduced her to the others, then quickly explained the situation. Eleanor listened intently, occasionally making notes in a small notebook. When James finished, she turned to Delia. Mrs. Porter, if you're willing, I'd like to hear your full story, not just for publication, though that's part of it, but as insurance. The more people who know the truth, the harder it will be for Porter to silence it. Delia hesitated only briefly before nodding. I'll tell you everything. As the sun set, Delia recounted her 5 years of marriage to Victor, the initial charm that had won her over, the gradual isolation from friends and family, the first blow that had come just weeks after their wedding, and the escalating violence that followed. She spoke of her failed attempts to escape, of Victor's powerful connections that had always brought her back to him, and finally, of Noah's intervention that had given her the first real hope of freedom. Eleanor listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly outraged. When Delia finished, the journalist closed her notebook with a decisive snap. Whatever happens tonight, she said, Victor Porter's reputation won't survive this, I promise you that. As full darkness fell, they put their plan into motion. Marshal Collins and his men moved silently down the ridge, approaching the ranch from different directions. Delia, James, the marshal, and Deputy Hayes circled around to the back of the property, staying in the shadows. The kitchen door is rarely locked, Delia whispered as they neared the house. The cook likes to smoke on the porch at night. Sure enough, they found an older man dozing in a chair outside the kitchen door, a pipe still clutched in his hand. The marshal signaled for silence as they crept past him into the darkened kitchen. Inside, Delia led them through the familiar rooms of what had once been her prison. The house was quiet, most of the hands likely in the bunkhouse by now. Victor, she knew, would be in his study at this hour, going over accounts with a glass of whiskey at his elbow. "The pantry is this way," she whispered, pointing to a door off the kitchen. They had just reached it when the sound of breaking glass and shouting erupted from the front of the house, the distraction the other deputies had been tasked with creating. "Now," the marshal said, drawing his gun. Quickly, Delia opened the pantry door and hurried to the trapdoor in the floor, pulling up the heavy iron ring. A set of steep stairs descended into darkness. "Noah," she called softly. "Noah, are you down there?" For a heart-stopping moment, there was no response. Then a weak voice replied, "Delia, is that really you?" "It's me," she confirmed, relief washing over her. "We've come to get you out." Deputy Hayes lit a lantern and Delia descended the stairs first, followed by the others. What she saw when the light revealed the cellar made her blood run cold. Noah was chained to the wall, his face bruised and bloodied, his shirt torn to reveal more injuries beneath. But his eyes, those incredible blue eyes, lit up when they found her. "You shouldn't have come," he said, though the joy in his voice belied his words. "Did you really think I wouldn't?" Delia replied, rushing to his side. James examined the chains while the marshal kept watch at the top of the stairs. "We'll need the key," James said. "Victor keeps it on him," Delia said. "Always." As if summoned by his name, Victor's voice suddenly called from above, "Delia." "Is that you down there, wife?" Everyone froze. Then the marshal signaled to Deputy Hayes, who moved silently up the stairs, positioning himself just out of sight. "Yes, Victor," Delia called back, her voice surprisingly steady. "I've come home." "I knew you would," Victor replied, satisfaction evident in his tone. "Come up here so I can see you." Delia glanced at the marshal, who nodded slightly. "I'm tending to Mr. Garrison first," she called. "You hurt him badly, Victor." "He deserved worse for taking what's mine," Victor snapped. "Step away from him, Delia, now." "I need the key to his chains," Delia said, ignoring the command. "You'll get no key from me. He can rot down there for all I care." The marshal signaled to Delia, mouthing, "Keep him talking." Understanding the strategy, Delia continued, "Then how am I supposed to bring him up as you ordered?" There was a pause then. "What are you talking about, your note?" Delia improvised. "You said to bring him up so you could finish it in front of me." Another pause, longer this time. "There was no note." "Victor," Delia said, letting impatience creep into her voice, "I wouldn't be here otherwise. Now either give me the key or come down and unlock him yourself." For a moment she thought he wouldn't fall for it. Then she heard his footsteps approaching the trapdoor. "Stand back from him," Victor ordered as he began descending the stairs. The marshal and Deputy Hayes pressed themselves against the wall on either side of the staircase, out of Victor's line of sight. James positioned himself behind a stack of crates, his gun drawn. Victor appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his cold eyes fixed on Delia. He was dressed impeccably as always, not a hair out of place. The contrast between his pristine appearance and Noah's battered state made Delia's blood boil. "There you are, wife," Victor said, his tone deceptively gentle. "I knew you'd come to your senses eventually." "Hello, Victor," Delia replied evenly. Victor's gaze shifted to Noah, narrowing with hatred. "Still alive, I see. Unfortunate." "The key, Victor," Delia prompted, forcing herself to remain calm. Victor smiled coldly. "Of course." He reached into his pocket, then froze as the marshal stepped forward, gun leveled at his chest. "Victor Porter, you're under arrest for kidnapping, attempted murder, and violation of a restraining order," the marshal announced. "Hands where I can see them." Victor's expression darkened with rage. "What is this, Justice?" Delia said simply. For a moment, it seemed Victor might comply. Then, with surprising speed for a man his size, he lunged forward, grabbing Delia and pulling her in front of him as a shield. "Drop your weapons," he snarled, producing a knife that he pressed to Delia's throat, "or I'll cut her open right here." The marshal and Deputy Hayes hesitated, their guns still trained on Victor but unable to fire without risking Delia's life. "Let her go, Porter," the marshal said evenly. "You're only making this worse for yourself," Victor laughed bitterly. "Worse, she's destroyed everything already. My reputation, my standing, all ruined because she couldn't learn her place." The knife pressed harder against Delia's throat, drawing a thin line of blood. She didn't flinch, her eyes locked on Noah's. "Do it," Noah said suddenly, his voice weak but determined. "Kill her if you're going to, Porter, but know that I will spend every remaining moment of my life hunting you down. And when I find you, not if, when I will make you suffer as you've made her suffer." Victor's grip tightened. Big words from a man in chains. "He won't be in chains forever," Delia said calmly, "but you will be, Victor. One way or another, this ends tonight." As she spoke, Delia's hand slowly moved to her pocket, where Mrs. Winters Daringer had rested since they set out from Cheyenne. The small gun Noah had taught her to use. The gun she had prayed she would never need. "You're right about one thing, wife," Victor hissed in her ear. "This does end tonight." In one fluid motion, Delia pulled the Daringer from her pocket, pressed it against Victor's side, and fired. The sound was deafening in the confined space. Victor's grip loosened in shock, the knife falling from his hand. Delia twisted away from him as he staggered backward, clutching his side where blood was already spreading across his fine shirt. "You shot me," he gasped, disbelief written across his features. "Yes," Delia confirmed, the Daringer still trained on him. "I did." Victor sank to his knees, his face pale with shock and pain. "My own wife." "No," Delia corrected him, "not your wife, not anymore." The marshal moved forward quickly, securing Victor despite his injury. "You'll live," he told him curtly. "Though you might wish otherwise once you're facing a judge." While Deputy Hayes helped the marshal with Victor, James found the key in Victor's pocket and quickly freed Noah from his chains. Delia rushed to Noah's side, supporting him as he struggled to stand. "You came back for me," Noah said wonderingly, his arm around her shoulders. "Of course I did," Delia replied, tears finally breaking free. "I love you, Noah Garrison." Despite his injuries, Noah's face lit up with a smile that transformed his battered features. "I love you too, Delia. Have since the moment I found you in that barn." As the marshal and deputy led a subdued Victor up the stairs, James helped Delia support Noah's weight. "Let's get you both out of here," the lawyer said. "This nightmare is finally over." And as they climbed the stairs together, emerging into the kitchen where Alina Bright waited with notebook in hand, Delia felt the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. Victor's hold on her was broken at last. She was free, free to heal, free to choose, free to love. The aftermath unfolded with a swiftness that took Delia by surprise. Victor's arrest, and the charges against him now including attempted murder of a U.S. Marshal, as he had tried to shoot Marshal Collins during the transfer to Cheyenne, created a sensation throughout the territory. Alina Bright's article, published in newspapers from Cheyenne to Denver, laid bare the truth of Victor Porter's cruelty and the systemic failures that had allowed it to continue unchecked. Other women came forward with similar stories of abuse at the hands of powerful men, creating a groundswell of support for legal reforms. Judge Wilson granted Delia's divorce in record time, citing extreme cruelty and attempted murder as more than sufficient grounds. Victor, still awaiting trial on the more serious charges, didn't contest it. His empire was crumbling, his allies distancing themselves as the extent of his crimes became public knowledge. Noah recovered from his injuries at James Montgomery's home in Cheyenne, where Delia nursed him back to health. His physical wounds healed faster than the emotional ones, the guilt over Ben's death, the trauma of his captivity, but with Delia by his side. He grew stronger each day, 3 months after the night at Victor's ranch. They stood together on the front porch of the Silver G. Mrs. Winters had welcomed them home with tears and admonishments about the state of the place in their absence. "Caleb did his best," she sniffed, "but a ranch needs its proper master, and a house needs a mistress." Noah squeezed Delia's hand at that, a silent question in his eyes. They had spoken of the future during their time in Cheyenne, tentative conversations about possibilities, about the deep love that had grown between them. But Noah had been careful not to press, understanding that Delia might need time after everything she'd endured. That evening, as the sun set over the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Noah found Delia in the garden Mrs. Winters had helped her start before everything had gone wrong. "It's still alive," Delia said with wonder, touching a resilient tomato plant that had somehow survived neglect and early frost. "Some things are meant to survive," Noah said quietly, coming to stand beside her, "to grow stronger after hardship." Delia looked up at him, taking in the earnest blue eyes that had first offered her kindness in that abandoned barn. The bruises on his face had faded, though a new scar ran along his jawline, a permanent reminder of what they had endured together. "Noah," she began, but he gently placed a finger against her lips. "Let me speak first," he requested. "Please." Delia nodded, her heart racing. Noah took both her hands in his. "Delia Porter, no, just Delia now," he corrected himself with a smile. "I never believed in fate until I found you hiding in that barn. I didn't know then that by breaking that lock, I was setting us both free." Tears welled in Delia's eyes at the simple truth of his words. "I love you," Noah continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I love your courage, your kindness, your strength. I love the way you hum when you're working, the way you stand up to Mrs. Winters when she's being stubborn, the way you've made this place feel like a home again." He sank to one knee before her, still holding her hands. "I know it might be too soon. I know you've only just won your freedom, but I don't want to waste another day without asking, Delia, will you marry me? Not to be my property or my possession, but my partner, my equal, my love." Delia didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, Noah Garrison, I will marry you." Noah's face broke into a radiant smile as he stood and pulled her into his arms. Their lips met in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, tender yet passionate, gentle yet fierce. When they finally parted, breathless and laughing, Noah pressed his forehead to hers. "I promise you'll never have reason to fear me," he whispered. "Not ever." "I know," Delia replied simply. "That's why I love you." They were married the following spring, as wildflowers carpeted the meadows around the Silver G. James Montgomery performed the ceremony, having added justice of the peace to his credentials. Alina Bright was there, documenting what she called a triumph of love over tyranny. Mrs. Winters cried openly, though she later denied it vehemently. Victor Porter was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison. Delia felt no joy at his downfall, only relief that he could no longer hurt her or anyone else. The orchard Delia and Noah planted that summer would bear fruit for decades to come. The home they built together would weather storms both literal and figurative, and the children they eventually welcomed, 2 strong-willed daughters and a gentle son, would grow up knowing only love, never fear. On cool autumn evenings, when the work was done and the children were asleep, Noah and Delia would often sit on the porch, watching the stars emerge over the land they both loved. "Do you ever think about that day?" Noah would sometimes ask. "When I broke the lock on that old barn door." And Delia would take his hand, tracing the lines of work and care that matched her own, and reply, "Every day. It was the day my life began."